Salut tout le monde. So this was not the plan. I was actually going to publish a video today that had to do with the visa. It feels kind of untimely. Like everything feels untimely at this point. So instead you get this. I don't really know what exactly I'm gonna say. Normally when I make videos I have a list of notes at the bare minimum, but you can't really process stuff like this with a list. At least I can't. And there also is that little bit of like reservation because I don't want to say the wrong thing. You know, it's not like I have all of the nitty-gritty details, and it's not like I am the most well-spoken person. This whole experience with me being in Paris has really been the first time that I'm going through some really not going through, I mean, I'm always going through stuff like any other human, but I mean, this is really the first time that I'm dealing with all the bullshit that's going on at home. And by home I mean the US, because as much as I hate that place, it still is where I came from, and disowning the US or trying to stay away from it for as long as possible doesn't take away from that fact, you know? It doesn't take away from the privilege, and it doesn't take away from the pain that I feel when shit like this happens. But anyway, yeah, so this is my first experience with processing stuff from afar, and I don't know if this is going to be helpful to people who are kind of in the same boat, or be helpful for anyone just trying to wrap their mind around what's going on, and I don't know, but here I am. So for anyone who doesn't know, it feels like the United States is always on fire, and I mean, how can it not be? It's not a surprise to anyone that the United States just is really messed up. What's a really good representation of just what I personally have been dealing with in the past 24-ish hours, 48 hours, is if you look at my Instagram story, I can't remember if I woke up or went to bed, but at one point on one day in recent days, I posted something about the Supreme Court overturning a New York rule, and according to what I've heard from someone on TikTok, this was unprovoked. Don't know if that's true, but what I heard on TikTok is that there was nobody contesting this law, and the Supreme Court just went and overruled it. And it basically now, it sets the precedent that any law-abiding US citizen can carry a gun, which is not what the people have been screaming for. I don't know if you've heard about the mass shooting in a Texas primary school or in a supermarket in Buffalo, which is close-ish to where I live. I mean, it's not like right next door, but it's just wild to me when I feel like I'm not going to say anything new here. I don't think I need to say why. It's just a heinous thing to do. And then yesterday I woke up to the news that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, which I've also seen referred to as Roe and Casey. First of all, the Roe v. Wade basically, I mean, I'm sure it did other things. Again, I don't know every single thing, but made access to abortion a federally protected thing. For those of you who don't know, there's like federal government, but then each state also has state law, and the federal government kind of takes precedence, I guess. Yeah, so I woke up to one of my rights being taken away, and there's so much I could say about this, but I need to hydrate because it's early. I mean, well, first of all, I guess I should explain that the Supreme Court, a bunch of is 9 people who have been appointed by former presidents. I don't know if Biden appointed anyone, I couldn't tell you, but Supreme Court justices are not voted in. We do not get a say in who the Supreme Court justice is, and Supreme Court justices can serve a lifetime. They can be there forever if they want to. So what happened was, during trying to decide if I want to say his name or not, during the previous president's term, he was able to put in, I think, 3, I want to say 3, I don't know, Supreme Court justices who would, you know, do his bidding. And look where we are now. Basically, I don't have faith in either Republicans or Democrats. Like, I'm not affiliated to either political party, but I will likely vote Democrat every time. Let's just put it that way. The current majority in the House of Representatives is Democrats, as is the Senate, and then obviously our president and vice president come from the Democratic Party, who, once again, I don't have any faith in actually making the structural changes that need to be made in our country. So it's like, even with all of this Democrat going on, the Supreme Court is still allowed to pass laws like this. Basically, like I said, the Supreme Court can do whatever they want regardless of who's in power at the time, which is how we've gotten here. To wake up, and this is a very privileged take, but as a white cis woman who only very recently came to terms with and embraced her sexuality and her queerness, I've never actually felt what it feels like to be stripped of a right that I've always had. There are a ton of people in the US who have lived their whole lives without certain rights, being denied rights, having their rights taken away from them. So I get that me saying this is not groundbreaking. And this isn't to say that I haven't gone through a bunch of messed up stuff in the US because of being just a woman in general. But at the level of rights, at the level of law, this is the first time. And trying to process that, but also processing it while being abroad, it's just really weird. I also should say, I can't remember if I said this already, that with the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, it's not that abortion is immediately illegal in the US. It's decided on a state-by-state basis. So from what I've seen, as of right now, roughly half the percentage of women in the US, and I don't know if the statistic includes other people who can get pregnant, but at least for women, half of women in the US roughly now do not have access to abortion. It is illegal, in fact. Personally, I come from a state where that is not the case. So on a very concrete, practical level, I understand that as someone who is abroad and who is trying to stay abroad, and as someone who the majority of her family and friends are in a state where that they're still going to have access if needed, but I don't feel at peace. There are just so many people affected by this, and I guess the two things that I've also been circling back to in my mind is the fact that, first of all, I saw another TikTok, see where I've been spending the majority of my time these past few days. There was somebody who was explaining really articulately, I believe, that this decision is mostly targeted towards white women, but the brunt of this, the worst suffering that this is going to cause is going to be among low-income women of color. Black women, Indigenous women, and other women of color, which is nothing new. Not to say that it's still not heinous. It's disgusting. It's evil, but to a certain extent, it also feels like U.S. protocol. But the reason why this dude was explaining that, the reason why it's directed towards white women is because, and I'm sure it's among other things, it's control of women's bodies, but it's specifically making sure that white women are producing white babies so that in the United States, the white majority doesn't lose the majority. There is documentation that shows that abortion, the whole hot topic of abortion à la base, had to do with race, which, once again, not a shocker in the United States. So that's something I keep thinking about. And then the other thing too is it's reproductive rights today. This is not the end goal. The reason why this was able to happen, is that correct English? Because the Supreme Court justices were able to say, I'm sure I'm reducing this, okay? They're able to say, there's nothing written in the Constitution about this. Therefore, we rule it unconstitutional. You know what else is not in the Constitution? Women. I was about to start listing and then I was like, the list is too long. Just rights for every single group that is not white, straight, cis, neurotypical, able-bodied, etc. Man is at risk. I guess that just kind of leads me to my next thing, which is processing all of this while I'm abroad. I understand that everyone copes in their own specific way, but it also has been a little bit difficult to see Americans abroad who are processing. It's hard because I don't want to, I'm not trying to call anyone out, but at the same time, it's really hard for me to see other people posting things like, oh, this is why I'm staying in the US. Or sorry, no, not why I'm staying in the US. This is why I'm staying abroad or staying in France, wherever it is. I've made videos in the past about not wanting to go back to the US. But to me, it's just, as someone who doesn't know come next year if I will be able to stay in France, it's really hard reading those posts. Because the word that comes to mind is tone deaf. Because I also think about all of the people in the US for whom leaving is not an option and or not a desire. Sorry, my phone ran out of storage. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so what I was saying at the beginning of the video is that me being in France and all of this stuff happening in the US, like, yeah, I personally don't have to deal with it, but that doesn't stop the privilege of, like, if I were in the US, this still is something I wouldn't have to deal with. And I think that when I just see people posting stuff like, oh, another reason to stay, so glad I'm in France, whatever, it feels like, it reminds me of something that I saw again on TikTok, where somebody was talking about, they were from the UK and they were talking about the US and how in previous years, whenever there was something that the US did that kind of made us look stupid and, you know, where our country messed up, happens a lot, it felt really good to like make jokes about the US because it felt like punching up, you know, like kind of punching the power. But now when these people see what is going on in the US and how many issues there are and how it's not the government that's suffering, it's the people, that's when the jokes start to feel like you're punching down, and it doesn't feel right to make the jokes anymore because there are actual people suffering, like so many people suffering, and these people, like the people in government aren't going to see your witty tweet or whatever about how much the US sucks or how much better your country is or whatever, but the people who are suffering and going through this crap will see it. And I guess just like when I think about people who are like, oh, another reason to stay, it just makes me feel like, again, like it just feels tone deaf because of the fact that this stuff is still going on. There are people who are still suffering. There are people who can't get out. But then it also makes me question, like, okay, well, because again, like, I'm not trying to judge people, it's just in my own processing experience, that's kind of been something that's been hard for me to see. Surprisingly, I haven't cried yet. I've been wondering, I actually, maybe it's not so surprising. Yesterday when I was talking to one of my best friends from home, I was saying like, oh, I haven't cried yet, I think I'm in shock. But the thing is, like, I don't think I'm in shock. This isn't a surprise that this happened, but it still sucks. So anyway, part of the reason I wonder if I haven't cried yet, I'm like, am I desensitized to this? Am I just so used to one piece of bad news after the other coming out of the US? Because it's not that I feel cut off. It's not that I feel like, oh, don't have to deal with it, I'm not in the US. It's just like, oh, another thing. Awesome. I think something that the US does that's really, it works in its favor is making the people feel helpless. And of course, like, setting up as many laws as they possibly can to actually make us helpless. That's a feeling that you really have to work hard to combat when you're in the US. You really, really need to do the work to convince yourself that you actually can make change, that you can organize, that your $5 donation will make a difference. So it's even harder when you're abroad to convince yourself that you can make change, you know? So I guess something, I mean, like I said, I'm still going through the motions. I don't even know if I said everything I want to say, but my plan, obviously I'm going to keep reading up on things to an extent. At some point I'm going to need to like turn everything off just for my own, the need for my brain to breathe, for my emotions to be felt. I guess I'm just going to see if there's anything happening in France in the way of protests. I'm going to be looking into organizations where I can donate. Ugh, I haven't even touched on the whole, I keep seeing this thing a lot online where it's like guns now have more rights than women do, and people who can get pregnant. But I don't even think I can go there right now. Like, so if you can, please donate. Please sign all the petitions. If you feel comfortable, please go to protests. Stay educated on this topic and do what you need to do / what you can to be okay. I think I'm gonna eat some breakfast because eating is taking care of myself. I hope you're okay. Bisous.